Hello and welcome to Illuminated. This is a space for us to talk about books, not only how they help us connect to ourselves and our stories and where we've been and where we're going, but also how they help us connect to the larger community. And today I want to talk to you about a book called Love You By, A Daughter's Journey in Essays and Poems by Brenda Miller. And I started this book and I wanted to just dive through it. And I realized that I actually wanted to slow down my reading and just allow myself the moment. And so at the end of each day, I'd give myself a couple chapters. There's poetry in here, so sometimes it was a little bit more depending on that. But really I wanted to really sit in the language, in what was being shared. And it's just beautifully written. And so I think what's interesting to me about this, it's talking about grief, the loss of her parents. It's talking about her childhood and her memories from her childhood. It's also talking about what we know, what we don't know from our parents, or what we've assumed. And now that they're older and we're seeing them towards the end of their life, we realize what we don't know. And then what we try to find out in that interim. And then often it's the case that even when our parents pass, there's that reflection or going or seeing their letters or their journals or the things that they collected, the little things that were important to them that we start to see in a different way. And so it's this whole journey through aging of parents, of what that means as a child of that parent, what it means to watch your parents go through this, then the loss of a parent and what that means, and just kind of moving through the layers of that grief of loss. If you think about that in a life, right, even if the people are still here, sometimes we grieve what was past as we move into what was forward. And that's just part of the process of life, to recognize moments that are gone, whether that's, you want to call that regret or just reflecting back and thinking, oh man, I wish I had talked to my mom about X when I was younger and I didn't. But now I'm taking this opportunity as someone in their 40s, 50s, whatever, to have this conversation with them. So it's those kind of moments that we have in here. And then there's often her own just reflection on where she is in life and what's going on in that space. And Brenda Miller is so brilliant in the way that she not only creates the stories, but then the methodology of whether that is a hermit crabbing or it's a braided essay or, in this space, poetry. And then the way that she puts this book together, that it really feels like a journey, and you feel like you've completed it at the end. You get to the end and you're like, that deep breath in, deep breath out. That was a beautiful journey to be on. So I love how she does that. I love how she seems to be very conscious of the way she puts the book together so that it is an experience. Sometimes when you have collections like this, it just feels like you're moving from one to the next, to the next, to the next. Or you're kind of like, that was a jarring switch from that essay to this essay, or that poem to this essay. Not the case here, just beautifully put together in this space. I think for me, as being in this considered sandwich generation with our parents getting older and what that means, I think this is just a space I'm also in, thinking about my parents and where they are in life and where I am in life, and which is far away from them in distance of where we're located. And so it's always something I'm thinking about as well. So there was very emotional moments for me in this space to think about my parents and what's going on in their life. And that's what I talk about in this podcast, right? That books provide a space for you to journey along with Brenda in her experience with her elderly parents, from moving them close to her to then their death, and then also trying to understand who they were, and then her reconciliation and her movement through grief. But you're also, throughout, reflecting back on yourself, your relationship with your parents, your location to your parents, their health, your health, whatever that is, and just kind of thinking through that. I also love that Brenda brings in some really personal moments, interactions with her parents, but then also these moments with their pets and their love of animals and what that means, and then the gardens and the birds. It's just so beautiful, all the things that she brings together in this connection that allows the reader to join in any angle and in any way. So as always, I often bring in a quote or talk about a specific section. I have two that I want to talk about, and one is called Evidence, where she moves through like Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C, and kind of takes us on this journey like you would look through evidence. And I love that methodology of chunking it essentially and giving us these brief bits, but also like talking to them about evidence.
A brief pause in programming to really offer my sincere thanks for you joining me here on the Lit Illuminated podcast, as well as all your support through likes and subscription and comments. It all matters for podcasts like this one. And I also just wanted to mention that Lit Illuminated is more than this podcast. There are other ways to get connected to literature and the way that it informs our lives. I offer workshops as well as MFA-like seminars. I do independent study as well as mentoring memoir writers. So if you're interested in getting more connected with Lit Illuminated, please check out RebeccaBeardsall.com. And thank you again for listening today.
There's another section where she plays with typos, like texting typos. So the first one, maybe we'll go wind tasting, and then kind of gives a story behind that of what that typo is, and then that story. And at one moment, she talks about her mother being in a creative writing class at the senior living space and her journey in that space and what she was getting out of that. And then we actually have that story added in here from her mom. And it always makes me think of like other people's words and allowing her mom to have a voice in this space and share her story. I thought that was just a beautiful addition. Throughout, we have photos included, which is also, I think, a great touch too, allowing us to see her parents. The other episode I just did a couple weeks ago on We Can Make a Life, I talked about this way of writing about others. How do we write about them and still honor them in that space? Don't speak for them in some way, but we also don't really know them fully as individuals. We only know someone as much as they're willing to let us know, whether that's a spouse, a sibling, a parent. We know them from what we see and what we experience, but that deep knowing, that's only if they let us in. And even then, I don't know, like, okay, I'm going off on a tangent there, but I think what's interesting as a memoir writer is that people are connected in our lives. We are connected to other people. And so how do you write about that and write about them and your relationship with them while still honoring them as individuals? And I think this was particularly in the case of a parent. There's a deeper connection there. Good or bad, it can go either way. But then how do you write about that? How do you work through that process and write about your parents or your siblings in these spaces? And I feel like Brenda Miller does a wonderful job of weaving in her own story, weaving in her voice, and also taking us on the journey of her discovery or her rediscovery of her parents. And also just to hold that space of grief, sadness, longing, of the desire to reconnect or to connect. And as I mentioned earlier, I really feel that the pacing, the combination of multiple storytelling methods in here between poetry and essay and the different forms of essay and the kind of cadence that we get in this whole book was just brilliant. So if you are in the creative nonfiction space and you want to look at what that process would look like, what's the intention of how to build a book to take a reader on an experience, this is a perfect example of that. So again, today we're talking about Love You by A Daughter's Journey, an essay and poems by Brenda Miller. I encourage you to check it out. Thanks for joining me today.